lot of people ask me about hammocks and about what it's like sleeping in a hammock and the type of stuff you need. So I thought I'd make a quick video showing my setup. I realize you don't have to get the things that I have, but there are components that are important to being comfortable. Just like sleeping in a tent, you know, when the weather's bad, you can't just lay out on the grass. You need certain things to keep you protected from the weather. Basically, keep you protected from hypothermia, which, you know, will kill you. Might seem like a lot of details, but it's just to keep you comfortable and warm and dry and safe and protected. And as I've been sleeping in a hammock for a few years now, I found things that worked really well and I found things that didn't work. So this is the system that I have right now. I've had for a little while because I've been pretty happy with it. So the first thing, your first line of defense from the weather is a tarp, especially if it's bad weather, rain, hail, snow, but even wind. You're gonna want some kind of protection. It's basically just a weather shield. And if you can see, mine has doors on the end flaps that close. And I'll show you those in a little more detail. The doors, if you can see, are just flaps that close on either side. And they're closed off with some bungee cord and some mitten hooks so that I can undo them and get in and out really easily. Four corners are just tied out with some line to a stake. Maybe I'll do another video showing in detail how I set that up. Then I also have these lines that pull the tarp out and away from you. And here's from the other side. The lines are connected to the side of the tarp on these little tabs. And I go to, I've set up my trekking pole so I can pull it out more horizontally. And then that's tied down to a stake down at the bottom. And that gives a little more volume inside of the tent and adds some stability in the wind. The wind blows against it, keeps it from hitting me in the face. All right, so once I have all of my lines pulled out, and again, you don't have to have these, but they make it really convenient in setting up and tearing down your stuff. And especially if you're gonna move from site to site and a multi-day trip, you wanna have a way of quickly tearing stuff down and setting it back up again. And when the weather's bad, this helps as well. What I'm talking about are these things. They're called tarp sleeves. And you got your tarp here and it's just blowing in the wind and everything's hanging out. Instead of having to fold it all up all nice and neat, you just grab this, you pull it across, and it just closes up your tarp. You pull one side, you pull the other side. Now they're all cozied up in their little snake skin. And now it's out of the way. And one thing I really like about doing it this way is, let's say it's a beautiful day like today, and you want to set your hammock up. You don't want to have a tarp out. And that's the thing. A lot of people say, do you need a tarp? You don't always need a tarp. If it's not windy, it's not cold, if it's blue sky and it's not going to rain, then yeah, definitely don't set one up. You want to have that nice view. You want to have the breeze blowing through. You want to be able to enjoy being out in the open and seeing the things. We got this beautiful view of a lake. I want to be able to see that. Well, if it does start to rain, and especially in most mountains, in the UINTAs, it's definitely that way.
Hey, dummy, get in here.
Oh my goodness, look at you.
The weather can turn really fast. I want to be able to deploy my tarp as quickly as possible. So having it in these tarp sleeves and tied up, ready to go, makes it very quick to just pull them back, unroll it, stake it down, and you're good. Okay, so like I said before, you don't have to have the same equipment that I have. In fact, let's show Austin's kit. He's got a homemade hammock that's basically just, you know, a piece of ripstop nylon. He had a couple little things to it to make it nicer. We could talk about that another time. But he's got just a simple hammock, and when the weather's cold and there are no bugs out, this is absolutely perfect. So when the bugs are bad, having a hammock with a mosquito net. Now you can get one that has one built in like mine, or you can get one that a mosquito net that just you add to it around the outside, and I have one like that for a different hammock. Either way, being able to be protected from the bugs is critical, because you don't want to be eaten alive. And even if you're wearing bug spray and you jump in there, you pull a hat over, one mosquito flying in your ear, it ruins your whole night. So having this mosquito net attached is great. Another thing I like about the hammock, oh, by the way, this is the Warbonnet Outdoors Blackbird hammock. I've used this for 3 years now. I love it. I absolutely love this thing. And one of the things I like about it, makes it pimped out just a little bit more, are these tie outs. A lot of hammocks have these, but they just basically pull the hammock away from you, and they stake out to the bottom, a little bungee cord. I replaced mine with reflective, although they're still black, so during the day you trip on them every time. But on the other side, what's great is the other pull out creates this little shelf. And if you see, I've got like a bunch of stuff in there. Like I've got a hat and a little charger and, you know, some extra clothes and my bags for my quilts and all this kind of stuff just sits in this shelf. And when you're in the hammock and you need like a hat or some gloves or something, you just reach over and grab them and they're right there. Super convenient. And they don't get lost. They don't swim around in your hammock. Absolutely love having that shelf. And there are other hammock companies that make hammocks with mosquito nets and even with tie outs, but I don't know of a single company that makes the shelf other than Warbonnet. So, and you can get another idea. Here's what the shelf looks like with all my goodies and stuff in there. I was charging my phone last night. There's a hat I wore, some socks, that kind of stuff. And then I've got this ridge line as well, and I've got little things I can hang my glasses. You can hang your headlamp. I have a pillow in here that's tied to a line so it stays in place. Like I said, you don't need these things, but the more time you spend in a hammock, these little luxuries make it that much more enjoyable. And I've had a simpler hammock and a simpler setup. It's a pretty basic tarp. I put my sleeping pad in there. I had my sleeping bag over the top of me and a really simple hammock, and it works just fine. But how many nights you sleep in there, you start to think, I wish I had a mosquito net, or I wish I had a place to put this. And pretty soon you realize that all these little luxuries can really make for a much more comfortable night. So once you have the hammock, you have bug protection, you have weather protection. Now you need to protect yourself from the cold. And this is one of the biggest questions I get. You can just use your sleeping bag in the hammock, and that works just fine. What I use is called a quilt, which is this guy. And it basically is a sleeping bag because it has a foot box, right? You slip your feet in there, but then you just wrap it over the top of you. There's no zipper on it, okay? No zipper. You just wrap it over the top of you like a blanket, and that keeps the top part warm. And then here's my pillow. I've tried a couple different pillows. This is the one I'm trying right now. It's made by Sea to Summit. It's inflatable. It's okay. I'm not 100% that it's the best, but we're figuring it out, experimenting. But that is the top quilt. Oh, if I didn't say, my top quilt was made by Jacks Are Better. It's the Hudson River. It's 20 degrees, made it down. It's light, packs down small. It's very warm, very comfortable. I absolutely love that quilt. And when you're in there, you sleep with your head over here and your feet in this corner. And this hammock, another nice feature is it actually is designed with a little foot box area that intentionally forces you to lay on a diagonal. And by laying on a diagonal, you lay a lot flatter. That's one of the things people who aren't familiar with hammocks get confused by is I lay like a banana. I'm laying in an arc and it hurts my back. Well, if you lay on a diagonal with your head at one end, on one side, and your foot on the other side, then you lay more flat and you don't have that, you know, arching happening. All right, so now how do you keep yourself from getting cold from underneath? Because if you just jump in your sleeping bag, the hammock and your body will squish all the insulation from your sleeping bag underneath you. And when the slightest breeze blows underneath you, if it's anything colder than 60, 70 degrees, 72, you are going to get cold. And last night it was 28, so you'll freeze to death. So you need to have some insulation underneath you. You can use a sleeping pad, like when you're normally camping. I've done that before. Sleeping pads work just fine. But what I use now is an underquilt. And actually, before I have my underquilt, I have this. It's an underquilt protector or weather shield or wind shield. And what I've noticed is that when it gets really windy and if my tarp's not protecting me well enough from the wind, that the wind will cut through my under insulation and it'll rob me of that heat. So this helps with that. So it's just basically a thin, light material. It's almost like a little mini hammock underneath my hammock. It's very light. Couldn't use it as a hammock. It's too thin and too small, but it covers the bottom of my hammock and protects it from the wind. And then what that protects is my underquilt, or my bottom quilt. And this one is also made by Warbonnet, same company that made the hammock itself. And this quilt was made specifically for this hammock. And all you do is you hook up the end, and you hook up the other end, and you're done. You don't have to make any kind of adjustment because it's cut and sewn and shaped for this hammock. And if you can see, it's cut at an angle, the quilted part, so that your head is over here and your feet are over here. Here's where the quilty part ends, right at the foot box. And you don't have to fiddle around with anything. You don't have to adjust anything. Last night, I sleep on my side sometimes, which is really comfortable. I sleep on my back. And whenever I moved around, the hammock, the quilt stayed exactly where it was supposed to stay all night. And if anything, if I was even a little bit cold on top, underneath, warm all night. This quilt was amazing. It was like having a fire underneath me. I absolutely loved it. So yeah, you can use your sleeping pad, but then you're trying to roll around and keep it from sliding out from underneath you. A quilt stays in its place and you can move around. You're enjoying just the feel of the hammock itself without the pad. And let me say something else about the hammock. A lot of hammockers say it's so much better than a tent because it's lighter. Well, that can be true. My dad has a really nice 2-man tent that his tent and sleeping bag, or his quilt and his pad and everything, weighs less than my entire setup. So it's not necessarily lighter. It's not going to be automatically lighter. His also compacts down smaller and takes up less room. His pack is smaller than mine and he can hold all that stuff. So it's not necessarily more compact. And then people say, hammockers will say, all you need is 2 trees. Well, this campsite that we're at, there's this huge field of flat, soft grass. And then down there is a huge field of flat, soft grass. And even though there are a lot of trees here, it took us a while to find the 2 or 3 perfect trees that are the right distance with the right in the wind. I mean, site selection is a big deal. So it was, if I had a tent, it would have been easy to throw a tent down here. With a hammock, it was a little more challenging. So don't think that a hammock is better in that way. But the reason why I sleep in a hammock is because I wake up in the morning and my back doesn't hurt. And that's really the main reason, because it's more comfortable for me than sleeping on the ground. No matter how comfortable the pad, and I've tried different pads, that's why I sleep in a hammock. All those other things can be a benefit if you know how to find the right site. And I mean, right now, where we are, between 2 trees, it's a slope. There's roots and sticks and pine needles. We didn't have to worry about any of that because you're floating above that. But really, it comes down to comfort. Okay, so that basically covers, it gives a general idea of what you need and what I use. There are a lot of other little details, and I can talk about that another time. But for the most part, you need something to protect you from the wind and the rain, something to protect you from the bugs, something to protect you from the cold. And the hammock protects you from the hard ground and sore back and joints and muscles and things like that. And all the little details make it a lot fancier and a lot more comfortable. But I absolutely love laying in a hammock. It's one of the motivations to get out here now. Whereas before, sleeping on the ground in a tent, I used to dread the sleeping part every night. So it's changed and it's been great. So love you. Bye.